It is time. You guys have seen my beets harvest, and it's time for me to show you my favorite way to eat them, which is to pickle them. So I'm honoring my Russian heritage and wearing my Matryoshka doll apron. First thing I do is wash the beets, and I use this bristle brush, which works really well because it just gets all the dirt and grime and everything off of them. So I was really pleased with my harvest this year. I can't remember what I said in the beets versus carrots video. I think I got 98 beets. So I'm so glad that I planted so many because some were small, but a lot were large. So this one is Detroit red, and they're nice and round. And then other ones that are more cylindrical, they are cylindra. So I have really round and then nice and oval. I did get small ones too, but big or small, I am taking them all, and they taste the same. So I'm pickling all of them. I don't care if they're big or small. My next step is to get the beets ready to boil them. And so what I do is I cut the top off that had the leaves, and then a lot of the roots were kind of long and dangly. So I just kind of cut the root off a little bit. Look at that. Look how long that is. Love it. So then that one I cut in half just because I was trying to make sure that everything fit in the pot properly. There's the baby one. So what I was doing, I had several pots and I was dividing the big ones in one pot, and then somewhat medium and small, I put them in another pot. You can see it better here. And that just makes sure that everything cooks kind of evenly. So keep all the big beets in one pot. So then you can kind of double check them and they'll be ready at the same time. And then all the small ones will obviously cook faster. So then I keep them in the next pot. Even when I put the water in the pot, I ended up dividing them even more. And I actually had to get a third pot out and then put the beets in there, just to making sure that none of the beets are above the water surface. So you want to make sure that everything is submerged when it's cooking. Once the beets start boiling, that's when I put the timer on for 30 minutes. And I noticed that as the beets are cooking, the water is evaporating. So I go ahead and add more water. That way the beets are always submerged and are underneath the water. To see if the beets are fully cooked, I do a fork test where I put the fork in, and then if the beet falls off the fork easily, that's when it's ready. But this time these weren't quite ready, so I added 15 more minutes to the clock. The next step is I put them all on the cutting board and then just let them cool down for a while, just enough so then I'm ready to handle them and peel the skin. I know of someone who never wants to cook beets because she's afraid that they'll stain her kitchen sink. And that makes me so sad because beets are they're so good for you and they taste amazing that I hope you guys won't be discouraged by, the thought of that it might stain your kitchen. It won't. Just clean right afterwards and it's no big deal. So I kept the water from the pan because I'm going to be using that later for the brine. This is my least favorite part just because I had to guess how many jars I need. My canner will only fit 7 quarts in there. So I was like, I don't know, maybe 6 will be enough. But in the end, I actually could have fit 7. But anyway, so it's important to wash your jars, the lids, the rings, everything. And the process that I'll be doing is called water steam. This is not a water bath. This is a steam, because a water bath, you would have had to put way more water in. But for the steam, I only had to put enough just above that metal stand, just enough water. So beforehand, once the water's kind of warming up, I put the jars in there so the jars can warm up with the canner, so I don't have any jars breaking like I did in my pickle video. See that back there? I only have 3 jars of pickles. It's supposed to be 5, so yeah, that happened. This recipe is enough for 1 quart jar. So since I had 6, I think I ended up just like multiplying by 5. But anyways, it just depends how many beets you have. So that's what I did. I think I did 5 cups of the water, and then 5 cups of vinegar, and then multiplying that sugar and then salt. This is my favorite way to eat beets. I will eat them even as a side dish, just pickled beet on the side of like pasta or mashed potatoes or something. My kids love it as a side dish, but then I also use these beets to make my Russian potato salad, which I'll do a video on that later, and then a Russian soup, borscht. You guys might know it. In all the movies, it's always borscht, but it's borscht. So yeah, I use those beets for that recipe as well. So here I'm using 2.5 cups of sugar. This is a 1 cup, so then I did the math. It's like 2 of those, and then I tried to do half of that, like eyeball it, half of that. I used a tablespoon measuring cup for salt, and since I did the recipe 5 times, then I ended up using 5 tablespoons of salt. After everything is added, I make sure to stir everything really well because the salt and sugar tend to stick to the bottom of the pan. So really stir it so everything kind of incorporates. By now, my jars are done heating up, and then now begins maybe my favorite part. So I get to peel all the skins off of the beets. So I cut off both ends, and then I kind of squeeze the beets, kind of like how you would squeeze water out of a washcloth, and then the skin just comes off. It just like slides off so easily. Sometimes there are moments where it kind of gets stuck. There's my baby beet. Sometimes it gets stuck, so then you can use the knife. So that's why I just have the knife in hand too. And then also I cut up big ones in pieces, or I don't know, just bite-sized pieces, just however you like to. If you leave them all big like that, how my beets are, I'm not gonna have enough jars to fit all those beets. So that's why I kind of had to do a little bit of a Tetris game, my favorite game. And then I had to just cut some of them in half or in thirds, whatever I needed to do to make sure that these beets fit into these 5 jars, because I'm not cleaning any more jars. Is it 5 jars or 6 jars? No, 6 jars. Yeah, 6 jars. So anyways, but yeah, the skin came off really easily, and it's just bada bing, bada boom. Repetition, keep doing it, and then it's all done. I let the brine cool down a little bit, but not too much, and then it was ready to be poured into the jars. And I made sure that I left like a 1/4 of an inch space. It's kind of hard to tell, but you just want to make sure that it's not filled all the way up, because the air bubbles have to come out in the steaming process. So you want to make sure that you leave some space at the top. And then after all the brine is put into the jars, I take a chopstick and then I just go around and make sure, kind of poke around and get all the air bubbles out of the jars so they are ready for canning. Then I take, I don't know, in this case it was a spoon, but I want to make sure that all the beets are kind of submerged in the liquid. So I push them down to make sure that everyone is under. At this time, I put my lids in the canner. The canner is warmed up, and so that way the lids have a chance for the rubber parts to kind of expand and warm up, and then that way it seals better on the jars. I make sure to position the lid center. It kind of seems obvious, but sometimes it doesn't quite sit right. So I really kind of wiggle it and make sure that it's right centered. And then I kind of hold it gently with my thumb while I put the rings on it. And when you tighten it, you want to make sure that it's finger tight, meaning you don't want to use all your muscles to just tighten this, like crazy, because you do want the air to escape air bubbles as it's in the canner. So I just kind of double check it, and just with my wrist just kind of apply gentle pressure, make sure that it's nice and closed. I don't know if you can see, but on the counter I had some leftover beets, and I had extra room in my canner that I could have fit one more jar. Look, see, I'm putting 6, and then if I could have scooted them over, I could have fit another jar. So, but I did end up eating those beets anyways. They weren't wasted, so I just kind of put the brine in a Pyrex and put the beets there, and then put that in the fridge. So we did end up eating it. Once everybody's in the canner, I'm waiting for the red arrow to be in the green zone. That's when I know that inside of the canner is hot enough that, like right now, that it's ready for me then to put timer on. So that way, once everybody's ready, then I put the timer for 30 minutes. That's the processing time. Then once the timer goes off for 30 minutes, then what I do is take the lid off of the canner, and then I turn the heat off. And then I put the timer for 5 minutes. And this just allows for everything to kind of regulate, so it's not dramatic change from, going from the canner into the counter. So then after the 5 minutes, then the jars are ready to be taken out. And this is my favorite part too. It's kind of like nerve-wracking sometimes, but it's also fun. I put my jars on a cutting board because my counters are really cold, and so I don't want to put them on the counters because then the jars might crack. But I've tried a towel before, that works, but I like the cutting boards better. So anyways, this is done. Bada bing, bada boom. All those beets are now pickled, and I cannot wait to make those recipes I told you about. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll see you later.